So just to start this off, we'll do a thought experiment. I have some imagery on the board, or on my presentation that will guide us through it. You can either close your eyes or watch the imagery, it's up to you. So we'll start. Start when water is in the sky. So if you can picture fog moving over the landscape like we usually have, imagine a droplet of water, if you can, floating in that landscape. And that droplet of water starts coalescing with other friends, and it makes a bigger droplet of water. And then that droplet of water passes by a blade of grass and eventually captures itself on that blade of grass and is hanging there above the ground. And then imagine that droplet of water falling down and into a pool that's sitting on the ground after a rainstorm, or it's just in a pool. And then if you can imagine at the bottom of that pool, that water slowly leaking down below the grass and just into the soil, into the root zone. So now you have this little droplet of water sitting in the root zone. And this is all happening under the forces of gravity. And then, by gravity, this droplet of water gets pulled down and works its way through the soil. And surrounded by this droplet of water is air and rock and soil and organic matter and roots. And it continues to fall down. And the path in which it falls is almost similar to a knitted sweater, where the knitted part, the fabric, is the path of the water, and the spaces in between the knitted wool would be grain, like earth matter, soil and sand, and it flows in this almost woven way as it continues and descends down through the soil. And this pattern is actually quite complex. And it's an analog to a lot of patterns we see on the surface. This is a aerial shot of a glacier in northern Canada. And it almost flows like an anastomosing stream as it works its way down at the path of least resistance, still surrounded by air and other things. And eventually it flows down and hits the water table, which we'll discuss in a bit. And if you can imagine that, once it hits the water table, there's no more air surrounding it. It's only rock matter and soil and water without air. Now, if you want to picture yourself in an aquifer with your buddies, it may look like a gigantic cave. And this is the Nika cave in Mexico, full of selenite crystals. It's like gypsum. And the reason why you can go down in this cave is because they drained it for mining. It's filled with water, and water made these crystals by precipitating out minerals in the water. But actually, underground is not that exciting. It's actually quite scary. This is a downhole photo of a well, and it's very tight, and there's not a lot of spaces. There's no flowing underground rivers. So if you can imagine yourself in the ground now, it doesn't seem the greatest. Or you could just base jump into a gigantic cave. And eventually hit the water table, which is way down in the cave. So we're going to focus on how water flows through the ground. And it is as abstract as this thought experiment was.